Hey, Rosie.
Hi.
Make sure. I always want to check. Are we live? Yes, I think we're live.
How do you know?
Everything looks green. Woohoo! Now it came up. Okay, awesome. So, people will be tuning in after a while. That's always what happens. First few seconds, no one tunes in. So I'm just going to give the quick intro anyway for people who want to see it in the future. So, hi, my name is Andreas. When I'm not here talking to Rosie, I'm a CEO of a tech company. I'm an investor. I'm an entrepreneur. And Rosie and we met at a real estate event. And I have to say that we really connected on our passion for emotional intelligence, our discussions about why vulnerability is so important. And also, as we kept talking, we realized that several of our values are very similar. And since then, we have had people around us who keep encouraging us to, hey, you guys are always talking about these things. Why don't you go live and you actually share what you guys are talking about? So we made it very easy for us. And the first session here, where we're going to talk about the power of vulnerability, which is kind of interesting. We dive right into the deep end. But the hope here is if we can just inspire one person with us leading with vulnerability, we're hoping that we either inspire them or they make a change that makes them happy. Then it's worth it for us. Okay, Rosie, tell me a little bit about who you are.
Who am I? And also, hi, Jada. Good to see you. Who am I? So my name's Rosie Noel. I launched my coaching business in 2013 after spending over 15 years in the corporate space as a coach and as a consultant. So I am very recently an entrepreneur. And I think I told you this, Andreas. I didn't realize when I first embarked on a new career path or different career path that I knew it was going to be a lot of professional growth. I didn't expect for it to be equal, if not more, personal growth. I've had a lot. It's been a very vulnerable time, just putting myself out there in so many new ways. And so I think that's even part of the basis for, the friendship that we developed was us just both exploring new things in different ways and having an appreciation for the difficulty, but also the necessity of being vulnerable when it comes to growth.
Yeah, and it's there are so many situations like we decided, right? So we're gonna kick off by just being vulnerable right up front, right? So I'm gonna start sharing something that happened to me this weekend, and just so you understand how important it is to have people you trust around you. So this Saturday, even though I'm going to start with, I've given a lot of corporate speeches, presentations, and other things. This Saturday, I was speaking at an event talking about something that was so personal and private to me, talking about my autistic son, how we struggled for years, and how my work and everything else was just chaos because of it. So it's not what I'm used to. So the night before, I end up talking a long time with Isa Fidelino, and then I started texting you, and I was so freaking nervous to go on this stage because it's so close to my heart. And to be honest, I was really scared that I couldn't present it and I would start crying in front of everyone. And that was real. That was one of the scares or the things I was scared about. But then you, Rosie, and also shout out to Vina Jetty, who really rephrased my mindset. But you, Rosie, said to me, lean into the vulnerability. And what if, and you wrote it perfectly in a text message to me, what if you go up on stage and you just start, instead of introducing yourself, just start by explaining to people how much this mattered to me, how I am asking how I'm very scared of what I'm about to do because it's not my normal corporate speech. And you also said that ask for their grace.
Mm.
And it set the entire stage. It sets the entire feeling of that speech. And if I didn't do that, I don't think it would have gone so good. And now I'm going to quickly say it because of its self-assurance thing. I killed it, but so nervous and I slept 4 hours before. But I was so afraid. Thank you, Rosie.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And thank you. I mean, for me as a coach and just as a friend in general, I always think it's such a privilege when people are vulnerable with me and share things, and also to know that some of the things that I say or do make a positive impact on somebody else. And so, and it's so funny because when you were texting me about the stuff you were nervous about, I was like, oh, you're already doing it. Like you're really so good being vulnerable one-on-one with people. It's just how do you do that on a stage? And it is a totally different ball game. But I think that you very naturally did it. And even when you just said you asked for grace, and I haven't seen the recording yet. I look forward to seeing the recording. But I think that like asking for grace or whatever form of that you did, where you like, it wasn't just, hey, I'm talking at you audience. You were like inviting them in. And I think that that is another form of vulnerability where you're like, hey, you get a peek behind the scenes that this is terrifying me and also come join me. And so I think that that vulnerability sets the tone in meetings, in conversations. And like the first time I met you, you were vulnerable within like 30 seconds. So even though I found you to be terrifying, I also was like, oh, okay, like this guy.
Why am I terrifying?
Well, you're like 8 feet tall. So like I felt like I was like an infant. But also I've told you about this before with Clifton Strengths, like you have a very commanding presence. And that is one of your top strengths is command and then also self-assurance. So it's like your physical presence is intimidating, but also your emotional presence is intimidating too. Like you seem like a no nonsense kind of person, and that it's good, right? I have so many friends in my life that are like that, and I am not. But it is like, ooh, okay, this guy's gonna tell it like it is, and that was a little scary.
But that I think, and you've said that, my wife Vesna, she keeps telling me that all the time, like take less space in a room. But I think this is she's been nagging me to do that for as long as I've known her. I think that's part of why I've been developing, why I believe in the power of vulnerability. Because basically, if I don't do that and I don't show me being vulnerable and I can mess up or whatever it is I'm showing, then I'm afraid that that's the perception people will have on me, or I will have on people.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I can't help it, but the high individualization in me, I'm just like throwing out. I talk about Clifton Strengths all day, every day. So I'm going to throw out words that probably mean nothing to nobody, but I have to acknowledge the people that have commented so far. So hi, Javier. Hi, Naomi. Yay. And hi, Donabelle. Who else? Jada is just coming in hot over here. I like it. Okay. I think I got
I
everybody.
haven't
Just a
even
lot
seen those comments. Where are you seeing them?
I don't
I'm
know, man.
missing it. Oh, I
Well,
see. Now I see. Now, yeah. Okay.
and
That's
there's
awesome.
Varsha. Hi, Varsha. Yay. I'll do my best to keep up with them. It's a lot, but Andreas, I'm high ranger, so I can be a lot of places at once.
I love it. Rosie, you come from the corporate world, right? Tell me how people see vulnerability there.
Oh, that is a loaded question. So in the corporate space, it's really interesting because there's been, I don't know how many years ago this started, but I would say at least in the last like 5-ish years, that there has been more of a push to like bring your full self to work and like lead with vulnerability. And like, so these concepts have been floating around in the corporate space. And it depends on what type of industry you're in or market, et cetera. Like I worked in a really conservative, paternalistic marketplace. And so I would always kind of talk about, there's like a spectrum of how progressive people are in corporate spaces when it comes to like people and culture. And I would always say like, most startup culture or like the Googles of the world, right, are like on the high end of the scale. As far as if this is norm, Google's like 10 years ahead. The company I was at was like 10 years behind. And that's just the reality, I think, depending on the industry. And so I can only I was at my last company for 10 years, so I can speak to that experience directly. But in general, it's like vulnerability started to become like a little bit of a buzzword. This concept of authenticity was a big buzzword in the corporate space. And so it's like, I think people had an appreciation for these concepts and a desire to lean into them, but didn't know how to. And it's almost like the corporate systems disallowed for it to exist in a real and impactful way. So I think like everybody individually craved that, but it's almost like either A, they didn't know how to, or B, this it was so big. If you're in a large corporate environment, being vulnerable is can be feel dangerous in some ways, right? Like especially if you're working for a public company, your words can have a direct impact on your stock price. And so like I think that there's just that's why I say the system, like it's just really complicated. And I think in a corporate space, it feels like there's more at risk when you're vulnerable. And so that kind of ties back to my comment of like there was a desire for it, but just like not really a knowing of how to actually achieve it. Curious
Yeah.
what it's like, been like from your experience as a CEO.
No, so English as second language, come from Sweden originally, and there when we started our leadership training, one of the key things we were pushed on from day one is be open, be vulnerable, because if you don't, you can't make connections with your peers, with your managers, with your employees. And then we come from a culture where directness, but no emotion, just directness. And when you have the combination of vulnerability, but you really care and you're vulnerable and you want it and you are direct in the conversation, it actually creates an amazing feedback loop almost where people don't shy away from saying what they think, but they do it in a very objective, humble way. And then include vulnerability where people say, the way you did that, it actually made me feel the following way. Because you can never take away someone's perception. But anyway, moving to US, that was a little bit of a culture shock. Even if I worked for a Scandinavian company, people get really uncomfortable when I was vulnerable. For example, I remember one of the first meetings we had when I had only a few employees working up in San Francisco. Um, I started telling people a private story and moving to US and all the things that scared me with it. And I could tell them people like, I don't know where to go now. Like this is almost too much. But it was my way of saying like, hey, you can be open and vulnerable with me. And it took a while. And then people really came around and adapted to it. And when we now then started the company I'm a CEO at today, we made it our core value. So we have one of the five core values is to be vulnerable and to be open and direct. And it's one of the things that everyone really appreciates in our company.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you say that, and we've talked about that before, like the concept of individual values, corporate values. We're both like big proponents for that. And what's interesting, and you had mentioned this, I first became interested in the concept of corporate values after watching and reading some of like Simon Sinek's work years ago. And I remember it's like anything that has a formula just really like burns into my brain. And it was um, values times behavior equals culture. Like, so culture is the intersection of values and behavior. And I know you've talked about all the work that you've done at your company, but it isn't, I'm sorry, you've talked about all the work you've done at your company to create the culture that you want, but it's more than just the values. It's also modeling, living to the values, holding yourself accountable to the values, holding other people accountable to the values. So essentially defining what type of behaviors align with those values and then dealing with the disconnect when it's there, which in essence is vulnerability, right? Acknowledging there's a disconnect and we have to figure out what the deal is.
Yeah. We even went as far in the company to actually can I say this officially? Maybe I can. We even go as far as people's bonuses are paid out based on how much they're living the core values.
Mhm.
And that has fueled a large interest of people, especially when it comes to vulnerability. I have witnessed over the last few years people coming in and they start sharing, and you really get people caring for one another. So we have leaned in extra on the importance of core value and behavior. And then, like you said, you got to lead with example. You got to be willing to be a little scared and share, but you can't, like you said, it's also the issue is that it's one thing to share internally of how you feel. it's a different thing to be vulnerable in an external setting when it comes to numbers and other things. So there I have to be a little bit more hesitant, like you started by saying earlier, or you said earlier. But absolutely internally.
Yeah. Yeah. I would be curious to hear your perspective on how you lead externally with vulnerability. But before we do that, if we're going to go there, there are a couple questions that I saw. Hi, Eddie, in the chat. So Jada asked, how do you know when is the best time to be vulnerable? Or sorry, how do you know when the best time to be vulnerable is in your job? I feel because I'm younger, if I'm more vulnerable or aloof, I don't seem credible. And then Varsha said, vulnerability attacks credibility and too much judgment. And these are all like tied, so I like these comments. I've experienced that too, Jada. I feel that if you show your skills right after that, your strengths show through. That's a really good comment. And wait, one more. Joel, what did you say? Powerful. What do you think when they say being vulnerable in front of the wrong person is like bleeding in front of the shark? That's a separate comment that I think we should talk about too. Kind of ties to.
Let's talk about that. But there is something about creating a safe room, right? So what I've been focused on is people I work with or that are my either friends, or if I'm part of a community or a peer group of other CEOs. I really focus on, like, I don't accept politics anywhere. I don't accept toxic people. I don't accept people who drives the conversation to their benefit instead of having an abundance mindset. But I think so there's a lot of situations where vulnerability, if used against you, can be risky as well. So that's sort of the anti patterns. And at least within the company, there I can control it. So if someone is behaving politically, I will just call them out in front of everyone. That's my directness. And then they know it's not okay to be selfish. And we are here to, if someone is vulnerable and they get taken advantage of that, that person, I will go after them. Like, that's really not okay. Instead, we should celebrate people being vulnerable. And I'll give one example. I don't think he's listening, but a guy, if you want to talk tall, he's a head taller than me and a big guy. One of our employees, I don't want to say his name, but he actually stood up in our last kickoff and just thanked everyone for being so amazing coworkers. And he was really vulnerable. He even started crying and explaining like how he feels this is the first workplace that feels like a home to him. And that for me was like pretty cool. Talk about vulnerability. Now he is a head taller than me, so I mean, who is going to go after that guy? But super, super powerful. And that was that was for me one of the highlights of that 3 day on site.
Yeah. Well, and it just goes to show that the power of community can show up in the corporate space. And clearly you fostered that sense of community within your company. And I feel like that was kind of going to be part of the response that I have to this like string of questions. I'm like, when is it okay to be vulnerable?
I just got off on another tangent there. Sorry, let's go back. So I just realized I don't see your questions. I only see my own comments.
Yes. I know. We got it. I wish we could figure that out better. So I'll reread them. So Jada said, and what you said is tied to that. So she said, how do you know when the best time is to be vulnerable in your job? And because she's younger, she feels that if she's more vulnerable or seems aloof, she won't seem credible. And Varsha said that vulnerability can attack your credibility and bring about too many judgments. And then I don't know who Caesar's 143 is, but brilliant comments to say, I've experienced that too, Jada. I feel that if you show your skills right after that, your strength shows through, which I think is a really good point. And I don't think you have to have, even if you're young and you don't have a lot of like work experience, we've talked about this a lot, Andreas, like showing your emotional experience, like your emotional intelligence, like that is a strength that you can show as well. And just how you cater to or handle the situation. And to go just a layer deeper on some of that, and connecting this back to the concept of community. So for me, vulnerability is like natural in some ways and really insanely difficult in other ways. And especially for me, if I don't really have problems being vulnerable one-on-one with people, but when it comes to being vulnerable in front of groups of people, it is absolutely terrifying. Just beyond, I can spill my guts to somebody one-on-one, but like if it's in front of a group of people, I just want to go and hide. And so I have found that what's helped me not only be able to show up in front of more than just one person, but also show up as myself more and more over time is to have like the feel like I have built relationships within a community or circle of people. So even if I don't know everybody in the audience or whatever group that I'm in, I feel like I've built trust and deep relationships with several people that I know have my back, that believe in me, and that will push me out of my comfort zone. And so if I fall on my face, which PS you're going to, like when you're vulnerable, you let in the bad and the good, like Varsha's comment, like people can come and attack you when you're vulnerable. And I do think it's worth diving deeper on that concept. But to kind of close the loop on Jada's question around like being young, and you know what that vulnerability could look like for you, it can, like, vulnerability when you're young is admitting you don't know something, right? And you would be surprised. I worked with a lot of like entry level employees and building out programs in my corporate life, and the interns and the people that were like 1 to 3 years of experience in, the best employees were the ones that asked the most questions, that stood up in the room and asked the stupid question, right? Like that nobody else wanted to ask, but everybody else had.
Stupid
Um,
questions.
what's that?
There are no stupid questions. There are only
Like they
questions.
thought it was stupid, and everybody was like, "Oh my god, thank God that person asked,"
Yeah.
right? And so, like, asking questions is a form of vulnerability that when you're younger, nobody expects you to have the answer. So it's okay. You're building your credibility, but you build credibility emotionally by knowing, by putting yourself out there and asking the question that needs to be asked. So I would say that's like my number one hack for being vulnerable when you're younger, is in, especially like in a space where you're networking, is just being really curious, and that makes people want to know you more. Anything
You
you'd add
used the
on that?
key word, curiosity. So I think the more curious you are, both to understanding yourself from an emotional intelligence perspective, and the more curious you are on others, by you asking the follow-up question when someone else is vulnerable, and trying to lean in and figure out how can I help you, you're actually fueling them as well. Like you're basically saying it's okay to be vulnerable, or how may I help you get past this. And just to draw a parallel, I'm going to use the speaking on the stage again because that scared me, but when I was doing that, it was because of the audience. The audience were nodding and following along and so on. And they were curious. I could tell on their facial expression, like, where is he going with this? But it's the same when someone shows vulnerability, and especially for those of you who are a little older and are listening to this, like, help the person that is vulnerable. It's not good if you just sit quiet. Then say, like, I feel the same way. Then you're validating it and you're saying it's okay to be vulnerable. And you're also saying the opposite, which is, if anyone goes after attacks them, I got their back, like you were saying, Rosie.
Yeah. Yes. And if you do get attacked and you come back, I don't know, with your tail between your legs, you have your people to lift you up and reassure you that there's learnings that came from it. You're still worthy and loved just because you made a mistake or somebody used, you know, like people will use things against you. Yeah, people will try to attack you when you're vulnerable. Like, but that's, you can't, like, our, if only our hearts could just only let in the good and not the bad, it would, that would be great, but it just doesn't work that day, work that way. When you shut yourself off to the bad, you shut yourself off to the good too.
Yeah.
And I know that all too well, and I am still learning how to open myself up to the bad and the good, because I've gotten really good at shutting myself off to the bad, and felt the consequences for many years of doing that.
Yeah. Someone just, I don't know if most of you, I'm not sure I want to out here, but let's just say someone from our community, of our investment community, recently started sharing a lot of things she have experienced in life. And I can tell you, she grew on me like 10x by doing so, because a person that is in a growth phase, they are like, they're overcoming their scars, building muscles, like they're building resilience. And so many people were so impressed by that. So Even if you have been reserved and you've been burned in the past, it's never too late to start leading with vulnerability. And I guarantee you, the more vulnerable you are, the more connections you make, and the happier life you get. It's it's just that simple. And there's I always forget her name. What's the power of vulnerability? What's her name? Our
Brene
favorite. Thank
Brown.
you. So that TED talk she did, like she concluded, like science wise, be vulnerable, make more connection, be happy. That's the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, as you were talking, the thing that came to mind, like, right, being vulnerable is like taking your armor off. But I will also say that the kind of armor that you need to be vulnerable, those are the connections, those are the friendships. Like, I've found those are the people that are in your close circle that have your back, that trust you no matter what. So this way, if you take a hit, like, your armor is your connections, your people. At least that's what I found for me. Like, it's helped me a lot. Again, to like when I don't believe in myself and I have other people, especially if I'm down, if I get kicked or whatever, that somebody reminds me that just because something didn't go well, just because somebody didn't see my worth, doesn't mean I don't have worth. And that, I don't know, that's helped a lot. Do you mind, Andreas, if I holler out a few of the other questions in the chat?
Yeah, and we have Eddie is listening in. We got Cece listening in. Brenda's listening in. Like Javier, you mentioned already. Marsha, like there's a bunch of people. Yay!
Marsha's tuned in Facebook and Instagram, so overachieving over there. Also, your wife is here, so hi, Vesna.
Uh-oh. Then I better not say something
We're in
dumb.
trouble. Stop talking about her. Hi, Vesna. Yay. Okay, so Joel. I haven't seen you in a while. I've missed you. Where is your first question? What do you think when they say be vulnerable in front of the wrong person? It's like bleeding in front of the shark. Okay, I feel like we kind of talked about that. And Donovan said the risk you take or do not take. I think it's a risk I would take to filter people in or out of my circle. That's a really good comment.
That and let's talk a little bit about the sharks and blood in water there,
Yeah.
but because I do think when you are working at a company, you're put together by someone else. Someone else is sort of building the group, and most people don't lead with culture mindset or behavioral mindset, so they will look more at your skill sets, which means you don't have to love your colleagues, but you have to get along with them. I would build your and when you the older you get, the more you learn not to give a F. I can't say that. I shouldn't say that, but you learn not to care as much. But when you're younger, I would recommend you to just because you grew up with someone doesn't mean they are emotionally growing. And it doesn't mean that they're developing the sophistication over time. It depends on your life choices. So for younger people, I would recommend to go seek people that are like-minded, which is back to finding the community outside of work, outside of whatever context you're in, and lean in heavily and be open and true there. That's how I think you will get the confidence to be even more vulnerable over time. And they will also perfect your skill set in identifying the right people to be vulnerable with.
Yes. And there was something you said. I think this kind of ties in. I had a thought and I lost it, but Joel also asked. He struggles heavily asking for help or finding guidance because of the fear of appearing stupid or missing out on opportunities because of confusion. And then how Drew, if I don't have the last name in there, it's hard for me to know who it is, but said, even as an experienced leader, admitting you don't know something and asking questions can feel risky. But I've had employees thank me for asking and for being open about not knowing things. It's absolutely terrifying. It's terrifying when you're not experienced, right? Younger in your career. I found in the corporate world, it was actually worse for the more experienced people, because then they have the ego and the pride and like, I should know this, so I'm not going to ask it. And like, I fell victim to that as well, right? Like nobody's impervious to these kinds of things, but it's like vulnerability is also contagious. Like when somebody does it, when somebody has the courage to ask a question. Even now, us having this conversation, admitting things that the not so beautiful sides of ourselves, that I think they are beautiful anyway, but like people are openly sharing things about themselves too. Like that's what I mean where it's contagious. So it is something. I don't know if it's worth in this conversation talking about, like, I think people are like in their heads, like, okay, yeah, that's cool. Vulnerability. I get it. I see the value in it, but I still can't, like, I don't understand the application of it, or what does it look like for me? And I do think that a little of that might be helpful, to like translate it to real things, or at least I know that's how my head works. And a lot of times in my coaching sessions are like, this is cool, but how do I actually apply this?
So for me, like shifting, so let's go into the topic feedback, for example. And when you give someone objective feedback, um, if and I think I said it before, it's the perception. So if you lead with this was the situation, you made me feel great, or you made me feel great, or you made me feel like not so good. But I think by saying that, you're actually doing two things. You're giving value to the other person, and they know that how to modify their behavior. But you're also leading with vulnerability by just providing the feedback of how they made you feel, or the situation made you feel. Now, I'm not talking go in and vent and rant. I'm talking about objectively, timely saying, this was the situation, either a big thank you, or this is how I felt about it, not so good, could we do something else the next time? That is a very easy way to start training your vulnerability muscle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think kind of going into there's fine lines between so many things. What you just described is a very healthy way of approaching something like that. And I think the number one factor to remember that makes it healthy versus toxic, when it's like sharing feedback, or like sharing, whether it's feedback or just something that upset you or bothered you, right, is to take ownership for your part in it. There is never a 100% responsible party in any relationship, in any reaction. It doesn't work that way. And if anybody that believes that is doing themselves a disservice, because there's learning opportunities to have in every interaction. Even if somebody walked up and slapped me in the face, right? I could find something to own about that situation. Does it mean I deserved it? No. Does that mean that it was my fault that it happened? No. But there are still like learnings that I can take away from it. And learnings come from taking some level of ownership. You don't learn if you don't really own it, right? Because then it's just something's happening to you. And things happen to us all the time. That's right, like a victim mentality. But I think just in general with vulnerability, it's like sharing the things that upset you and owning your part, not only in the problem, but especially in the solution, because you may not have caused the problem, but it is your responsibility to be a part of the solution. And to me, that's vulnerability, is saying like, I don't know what happened here, but I am accepting the fact that I need to be a part of the solution.
Say that again, because not the last piece, but you need to own up to your part of it. Like, so many people miss that, and it becomes an emotional reasoning, or almost like a scar, and they have to deal with that. So they're not open to, I mean, how many interactions have you ever seen where it's 100% one person's fault and 0% another person?
A lot. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That
Yeah.
perception happens a lot. I don't think
It's always someone, like, you have some percentage in it, and it's also how you manage it. So one person here, they said something, you mentioned it, the whole speaking up. So I've sat on both ends, like the employee and being the top. Being in the top, here's what happens. Let's say we have an all staff, and I could tell someone ask a sharp question and it's pointed, or they are they're really curious, or they're not accepting something. And I'm not just saying this to be nice now. Afterwards, we all in the leadership team will say, that was a really good question. We should have actually considered having that answer thought out before the event. And it's never like someone saying, oh, that was stupid, or why did they ask? Like, I've never heard that in an executive group. What they do instead is they typically look at ourselves and we say, we kind of messed that up, or yeah, we didn't see that angle, or yeah, we need to address that. Like, I didn't know that was the case. So there is, people think that, oh, we're going to go back after the meeting and talk trash about people that ask the questions. Like, no, it's the opposite. We don't know. And if people are not open and speaking their minds, how can we optimize then? It just doesn't work. So people have this perception, at least, and I've been in several CEO peer groups for years. People don't think that way. I don't know how to explain it. Sure, there are assholes out there that will think that way, but most people I meet, no, because in the end, they know that the company can't exist without the employees or without everyone in the company. So they don't have a choice. Like, they have to be curious and listen.
Yeah.
So fear, I think the fear is more from within the individual rather than the perception of the rest. And everyone else will see it as brave.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
saw that Vina just joined, so now we should maybe be nice with her now.
Oh, I was gonna say, finally, we can dig into the good stuff. Just kidding. Haha, love you, Vina. Um, oh gosh, yeah. I love what you said, and the like there will be people that will judge your vulnerability. You're never going to have like a one, bat 1,000% with that either. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't buy it, somebody that, I don't know, thinks it's manipulative. Is that going to be the majority? No. But there are, coming even from my corporate experience, if with that example of somebody in a meeting asking a hard question, there are some, like you described, how healthy leaders react, right? Not everybody reacts that way. Some leaders react as like, how could they say that? Or they judge the person, or they like, they don't take the time to take responsibility, like you said. And that's just going to happen because you can't control how much emotional intelligence somebody's developed. You can't control what somebody values. You can only control how you show up. And so for me, that goes back to like having your people. So even in a W-2, having like your people, especially if you might not have rapport with every single leader, but if it's depending on what your role is, like your direct supervisor or your manager or your director, et cetera, like building those trusted relationships so that when you are vulnerable, if ABC person over here perceives it one way, you know that you have a group of people that trust you and trust your integrity and your intent, et cetera. And Varsha, you're coming in hot with the questions over here. Andreas, I think you mentioned, but I forgot, what inspired you to be vulnerable? I mean, what inspires you to be supportive of being vulnerable? When did that shift and realization happen to you?
Wow, brilliant questions. Okay, we're talking vulnerability. Let's be vulnerable.
Do it.
You know part of this story, Rosie, but so what inspired me? So I was brought up with just a mother. I didn't really have a father picture in my life growing up. So I was fighting authority my entire life. And then when I was, after graduating, I started working for a few years. I was starting to become a manager or a leader of the company. And then I and my wife was, so this was actually 2012, and my wife was pregnant with our first son. And what ended up happening was I was actually fighting myself. I had this facade, this strong facade. I fight authority. I'm not vulnerable. Like, I'm gonna slay anyone who is an authority, and anyone that, like, the whole emotional thing. I was not showing it. So at one event in this leadership training, I realized I was fighting myself, and I was sabotaging myself so incredibly much that and here is, I'll do this super brief, but in this leadership event, you go up and you present a topic, and then for 2 hours, people, and you're not allowed to say anything. You sit and you look out a window, and everyone else talks about you, like the deepest, darkest things they think about you, and you have this psychologist who just keep upping the temperature in the room. Yeah, very, very I cried. That was painful. But here's the thing. What I realized is, if I'm not open, and open is sort of the entry to vulnerability. If I don't take on an open mindset, I will never understand what others truly think of me.
Mm.
Number two, if I don't take on openness. I won't be able to truly deeply, I have this facade, I won't be able to connect with people. And at that point, like, I had to slay the dragon of fighting authority and fighting myself, and like, I didn't have a choice. I was becoming a father. So in that moment, like, I went home that afternoon. I slept. I fell asleep like at 5 p.m. and I slept to the day after like 10 a.m. I was emotionally drained when this happened. But anyway, everyone talked about, I forgot the end of the story. Everyone talks about you. You look at the window, and then you have to go up on stage and you have to only thank people for what they said. You're not allowed to attack back. And that was intense. And but again, that was the aha moment. Like, okay, I don't know what people think about me. I don't know if I am truly being genuine to myself, and I got to break the barrier I put up for everyone else. Like, that was my way of coping. So after that, I made like a life mission that I don't want to say overshare, because we need to talk about that, Rosie, of people who overshare as well. But I am going to share much more, so people feel comfortable telling me what they truly think of me. And it's a gift when people, like, every time I get feedback, I start by saying thank you. Like, it's so powerful to just say thank you, because think of the how much anxiety that person had built up in order for me to come to me and say something to me. But that was a long, very long answer. But that was actually I'm showing vulnerability here. This is still fresh in my mind, but it's like so long ago. But that was the turning point. And then it was like just fueling it more and more and more open, more and more vulnerable. And it has only served me well.
And what about before that moment? Like, did you get feedback and reject it? Or like, what was it like before that moment?
Yeah. I rejected it, but I'm sharp enough where I'm able to spin things. So I make people I sort of I said, heard, kind of understood, but more rejected and accepted when people were saying things to me. But I
Mm.
still made sure that they felt that they had been understood. So I kind of figured out, if I don't make them feel understood, they won't come back to me. But I did not internalize it before that. I did not.
That's so funny, just because I know your Clifton strengths and your number one theme is strategic. What you just described is like a classic strategic command combination, where you're like, you had the strategy for it. Like, I've seen it in that combination for you. Like, you built a strategy for how you'd manage the feedback, but you didn't actually internalize the feedback. You just had a
Yeah.
strategy for what to do with it.
But after that moment, every single time someone says something to me, and often when people come to me, I will often ask them follow-up questions, because I really want to understand,
Mhm.
because they spend so much energy, like, and like you said, I high command and self-assured, or whatever my Clifton strengths are. You always tell me what they are, Rosie. By the way, I should put, while I say that, I should put that up. Actually, I prepared this. So, like, little promo here, like, go take the Clifton strength, book a time with Rosie. I guarantee you it's worth it. And here's why. I have had the fortunate to have mentors and done so many assessments and other things throughout my career. So when we did this, Rosie, the Clifton strength, I didn't realize like how much my strength can also be a negative. And I
Mhm.
know that's not the intention of them. And so I'm telling you, for someone like me who has been really working with myself for years, a lot of hard work, the Clifton strength made me realize that this is a different level to it. And so, mini commercial here, but it's worth it. Like, seriously, go work with Rosie. She's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, and it is. I know. Feel like I coached with somebody earlier today, and this happens. They're like, I know I'm not allowed to say weakness. I know you don't like the word weakness. It's not. That's. I feel like that's more right. We say areas of opportunity instead of weakness. Like,
I
what I
know.
like about Clifton Strengths is it gives us better language to talk about, like, here's the power of command. But just because you're talented, not every talent is automatically a strength. Sometimes your talents get used against you. So yes, if you are really commanding and intimidating people so that nobody else is going to speak up because you're constantly going to be the one that's saying all the things, then absolutely that is not a strength. You might be talented at it, right? But it's getting in your way. It's getting in the way of your success, of the outcomes you're driving towards. So in that way, it is a weakness, and they all of our talents can show up as strengths or weaknesses. And the more you can highlight that, the more you can make the choice and make a concerted effort to grow it into a strength in all of the areas possible. So,
I don't know if
yeah.
this comment is out of context, but Vina said it's like a horoscope for your personality.
Yes, Vina always says that. Or she'll call me like a business psychic. I'm like, I don't think that's a thing. And I'm not a business psychic. It's just I've gotten really good at interpreting Clifton Strengths reports for people. Okay, wait, let's see. So what did Julie Stone? People don't like being vulnerable because it promotes opinions, feedback, and judgment. And that means you might hear something you perceive as a negative. The shift is realizing that uncomfortable feedback is your key to growth. That sounds like the shift that you made, Andreas, that you just talked about.
She is Julie is one of the people that work at the company I manage, and she's extremely open to feedback. And what's super cool with her is within 24 hours, she can just, if you give her the feedback, she can just change it and go do it instantly.
Yeah, that's impressive. That is, most people emotionally spin for a while before they can incorporate the feedback.
Vina asked if this is on YouTube as well. Yeah, we're streaming it on YouTube as well.
Yes, Miss High Maximizer. We are on all of the platforms.
And not only, it's both Rosie's and mine. So you can go to either channel. You can go to Rosie's Instagram, Rosie's Facebook. We split it 50-50.
We'll know if you're picking a favorite. And it's okay if you pick Andreas, because why wouldn't you? But okay, wait, there's one other comment.
Oh, she's switching to you now, I think.
She's winking to me?
No, she's switching over to your stream instead now, probably.
Got to build some harmony. So, okay, wait, we have another comment. This is so true. We have to be careful taking responsibility of our part. Some will give you all the blame. I've been exploring this idea of oversharing to Andreas. It's made me cringe. So maybe is it worth talking about oversharing briefly?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, well, I'll share. This is me like processing in real time. I do think that people think vulnerability is either oversharing or putting it all out there, or like, yes, just like bearing it all. And like, sure, it can be that, but I wouldn't say that's like a healthy manifestation of vulnerability. And I think oversharing in and of itself like can happen for various reasons, especially if somebody's like a really strong communicator. They use communication to connect with other people. And so like, can it go into the oversharing realm? Yes. And so it's like learning kind of like high communication as a Clifton Strengths, like learning how to wield the weapon so that like you're not going just like that fine line between being vulnerable and oversharing. And I will say, like, when I was younger, I definitely used to overshare. Not so long ago, would overshare because I would find that that's how I built connections with people, was when I was vulnerable and authentic. Welcome back, Vina. I like how she went to YouTube. She's just going to go on all the platforms. And so like, I feel like I built really deep, strong relationships because I would put it all out there with people. But in other instances, I think it was for me like a coping mechanism for my anxiety. So it was just like, oh, I don't know what to say. So I'm just going to say things and these might be inappropriate, but I don't really know. Right. And so I've learned, do I still have anxiety? Absolutely. I have just learned how to manage it in a way that doesn't tie to oversharing anymore. So it's definitely been like an emotional growth thing for me. So now, I think I told you this, Andreas, I had a fear, like there's always those people, I don't know, on like Facebook that are like, I had a terrible day today and everybody's a jerk. And I like, or just like passive aggressive comments, like somebody told me they hated me today. And so I'm like, oh, is that vulnerability? Like, I'm worried if I start being vulnerable, then I'm going to come off as like that person that's like passive aggressive or just like airing my dirty laundry all the time. And you were like, Rosie, you're not going to do that. And I do think that there's that perception, like there are healthy ways to describe something that happened to you or your perspective on things or whatever in a way that doesn't attack or diminish or shame anybody else involved in the situation. That goes back to like taking ownership for, oh, hi, Ice. Taking ownership for like your responsibility and really not making it about other people, just making it about yourself.
You have to develop a feeling there, right? So when you're oversharing, if you go into that route and the other isn't, you have to be curious on the other person. If they're not reciprocating your sharing, and if you ask them a question about how they perceive what you said, and if they don't give you the reply, then you might be overdoing it. And it can, when you overshare, it sometimes also can slip into venting, because then you tie it to the emotional thing that you experience. And I think we want to touch on this super quick, Rosie, because I have noticed this over the years. There is a very big difference when you're being vulnerable, when you're sharing based on emotional expressiveness versus logical reasoning. And people can't always cope with the full emotional version. So I always, when sharing something, or you're preparing to share something where you think it's important to share it, to get the someone else to lift you up, I think taking a step back and sleeping on it is always my recommendation if you feel uncomfortable, and then try to switch out of the emotional state you might be in if you need to be vulnerable, and then switch into the logical. I'll admit, the speech this weekend, I was absolutely in emotional reasoning. Like, you, Rosie, Ice, Vina, you all made it very crystal clear for me. You're in an emotional state. You rephrased everything I said, and then you presented the logic. But that doesn't happen to me that often. But it also, so what that then gives me an opportunity in many cases to see when people are oversharing, venting, or they're going too much in one direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Emotions for the win, Vina. And
Yes.
Julie's
And
comment is really good. Oversharing can be an insensitive and selfish act.
yeah. And Sage asked that. He's like, is oversharing more about serving yourself and not as much about serving others? Yes. Yes, it
Yes.
is. And it's hard, but so that's where it goes back to the fine line, but you want to share enough, right? So that you're like being vulnerable, but it's not I think that's a really good point that you make, not from like such a raw emotional place. And I feel like how I baby stepped my way there, and it's a journey, right? But I would, like, if I'd be really heated about something, I'd write an email, and I just like write a really long email, and then I'd be like, I'm not going to send this email. And then I'd reread it the next day, and I'd be like, I've processed this. Do I need to send the email? Does this need to be a conversation? What? So I had, maybe the emotions were still there, but I hadn't, like, sleeping on it is like the number one gift that I gave to myself when it tied to like having difficult conversations or things that were just emotionally triggering. Mina goes, well, damn, Julie. But I do think that's like, we're human, right? Like, we are emotional beings. It's okay to be emotionally triggered by things. For me, when that happens, I go to the people that I trust the most and let them see that side of me as like, you don't have to say, okay, well, like, I now have to figure this out on my own. No, I process it with the people, like my husband, my closest friends, right? That I trust the most, that will help me get out of that spinning mode. Cause I will spin if I do it entirely by myself. And maybe as I become more evolved, I might not need to do that. I'd be curious to hear your perspective, but like, I'm very emotional and I need to have like multiple checks and balances to help maintain that for me.
I have to give a couple of comments. So one, I don't see exactly the name here, but it says, "Hello, coworkers. I hope this email doesn't find you well." That was funny.
Tell us
That's
how you really feel.
most aggressive. We had a question. How do you compare vulnerability about yourself versus where your company stand is and is heading? Do you limit the second one a lot? So I personally don't limit it. I am very open inside of our company, and I believe it's important to do. Now, the one thing I do limit is, let's say we go through, we have a deadline coming up and everyone is working really hard. This is a good example of oversharing. People don't want to hear about my health issues at that time. Like, I need to back off. It's not about me, it's about the common good of the company. So that's a great example of where I would limit my vulnerability and not share everything, just so I don't derail people. Any thoughts on that one, Rosie, for you?
Yeah, I think that's, again, another healthy manifestation of vulnerability in like a corporate leadership space. I also, again, Clifton Strengths terms that might not mean things to everybody, but I'm high intellection and I'm such a person that likes to process things. So the things that we're talking about are things I've spent like countless hours processing in my brain. So it just flows naturally. But what you just asked me, I'm like, I haven't really thought on that before. So what else? But part of my being vulnerable is just processing things in real time, even if it's ugly or not, only version one of what the final thought will be. As I say that, I think like having seen leaders like navigate through change or difficult periods, right? Like a time where you would expect for there to be some level of vulnerability coming from like a corporate space about the company, or right, like can be numbers or can just be about other, like experience a lot of turnover, like changes in the marketplace that are impacting things, etc. And I would say the number one thing that I have found is been like, I don't know, like, I don't know what the right word is, not like a deterrent, but basically when I do think that a lot of leaders, most leaders, put a lot of like thought and care into their messaging, especially when it's going to like a wider audience, if it's about the company, etc. I also think that not all leaders are really listening. Like they'll hear, but
True.
they're not really listening. And I think that when that happens, then it's like their messaging is just one way messaging. And so they might like cherry pick the feedback that they get, or cherry pick the topics that they think are as important, or and everybody does that. Like everybody is like, if something's top of mind for me, it's like the red car thing, right? I think when I'm thinking about something, I see it everywhere else. And I feel like some form of that happens. But I guess I think like as a leader, the best thing that you can do in a corporate space is to just listen to not only the like fellow leaders, but also to what like the needs of people are, that like either they're explicitly saying or is implicit, and do something with that. Don't avoid it. Don't like put it under the rug. Maybe you have to figure out a strategy for how to manage to it. But I think too often it's like, ooh, this is like too complex or it's too big, or we'll figure it out later. And then years go by and it never gets dealt with. So I'd be curious how you, and I don't know if we get kicked off Instagram in like 1 minute, but
I don't know either, because I was gonna say one thing. I want to make sure okay, so most people get to witness what Rosie and I do. We say, let's book an hour or let's book 20 minutes. Hey, can I talk to you for 5 minutes? And then 2-3 hours later, it's like, yeah, I think we need to go be with our families now for the weekend, like to spend that time with them. So, but we love this topic. I just want to say one thing that we talked about often, and we have kind of just touched the surface on it. It is finding the right group of people around you, and you don't always find them at the workplace. Finding your community of like-minded people, that has been the biggest growth trajectory for me, and I know for you as well, Rosie. Just surrounding yourself with people that want to elevate you, that you can dare to be as vulnerable as you want to be with, and by doing so, everyone just accelerates one another so much quicker. um and I last thing I will say there, and then I'll pass it over to you and hear your view on this. But I know we talked about it before, so I think I know your view. But every time I have, if it's a vulnerability aspect and I can be truly vulnerable with the people, it's either has been with mentors, with a CEO peer group, with a friendship group that we all just share common values, or in I have an interest in something, or it's an investment class, or whatever it is. Finding that group of people that all have a curiosity and want to grow, and if you then mix in vulnerability on top of that, you can make connections so quickly. But you got to seek it yourself.
Yes, 100%. And okay, wait, before I comment on that, I don't want to lose any more. Oh, Miriam, I don't know if any of these people are still here, but hi, Miriam. Hi, Bridget. Happy belated birthday. Let's see. Homage. Hello. Hi, Avishkar. Who else?
Bunch
John.
of people I know. We might
Yeah.
get kicked off now on Instagram. Let's see what happens, but we can keep
Yeah.
going anyway for the other platforms.
Yeah.
Maybe I
Yeah.
should drop the. I don't have it linking right in front of me right now to the
Oh,
YouTube.
for the YouTube. Yeah, I can pull it up. and drop it into. But
I think I want to lift one. I didn't realize I can do this until now. Technology. So I'm going to make you a little bit embarrassed for 2 seconds and put
oh,
that
good.
comment.
I love to be embarrassed.
Can
What
you
do you
see it
do?
on
No,
your
wait.
screen?
No, I don't see it.
Okay, but it said, Rosie, you look like you're on
Oh,
fire or something.
I see it now. Thank you. I was choosing to ignore that one though. Vina is a number one hype woman, hype person. I think she out hypes the men and the women. So yes, thank you, Vina. And great segue also, because and I feel like I try to, whenever I'm in coaching sessions with people, I try to be really careful about not like talking about myself or relating things back to myself. But I usually make an exception when I feel like my vulnerability or my sharing will help them learn something more about themselves. And that, so really the main thing that I share occasionally in coaching sessions, which I share outside of coaching sessions all the time, but is that like I when I first started working with Vina, like barely at the end of August, when she introduced me to her, just to her community, right? Like brought me on a call. She was positioning me as an expert. She was like, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't, an expert, like I couldn't possibly use that word next to my name for anything. And so like I went through months of giving myself hell, of not believing in myself, of thinking like 6 months later, I used to have the thought that people were only talking, like only booking sessions with me or bringing me on calls or whatever, either A, because they were being nice to me, B, because they were doing a favor for Vina, which still means being nice to somebody, like that they didn't actually value what I was doing. They were just being nice because they thought I was a nice person and they liked Vina and they wanted to make her happy. Like this was the logic that went through my head. And even now that thought still comes in. Even now when people are paying for coaching sessions with me, there's still like this imposter that comes in. They're like, but do they really see the value? Um, and
How
so I
many
just,
people did you work with in January again? I think you said a number there. You don't just have to say how much revenue, but I
oh,
think you mentioned something, how many coaching calls you did there.
I was averaging like 30 calls a week. I was trying to get more than that, but that was about my max of 30 a week.
30 calls a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we killed that imposter syndrome, right?
I wouldn't say I didn't kill it, but I'm working on like the thought comes in now and I'm like, thank you for your interest. Not going to entertain that thought. Like, I don't know if that thought will ever, those types of thoughts will ever go away, but I am getting better at building the muscle of knowing where to redirect it, aka to the garbage can. And so, but I always like to share that, like, so for me, that's a form of vulnerability and just sharing, like, how painful it was to insert myself into new spaces with new groups of people, with being positioned as an expert where all I wanted to do was like crawl into a hole and hide. 30 calls a week, you know what you're doing. I see that and I'm like, but do I? What? It's like that imposter, like, but what if they really knew and they find out that I'm really just a fraud? And so like the logical part of my brain knows that that's silly, but the emotional part doesn't. And I've just gotten better at managing that. But I do like to share it to people because people will be like, I don't like to put myself out there on social media, or I have to wait until ABC. If it wasn't for people like Vina just yelling at me every day, telling me that that's fine, I can overthink it all I want, but like do it anyway. Like it was like having that close circle of people, and there was like a waterfall effect because Vina helped to lift me up, which then introduced me to other people that helped lift me up, and like that community, like people like Christy, like I don't know if Christy's on here, but like she just like very quickly helped to like make me feel good. Like so many people, Gabby, there were like so many people in the community that just made me feel welcomed and made me feel like I was just valuable as a human being, regardless of whether or not I was an expert. And then through over time, I built like stronger and deeper connections with people, right? Like with Ice, with you, etc. And that helped me to build my confidence. So it was like, I think the repetitions and forcing myself, no matter how painful it was. And yes, I would cry because sometimes it was so painful. And then also like building the deep relationships where I could go to people in like a moment of weakness, but I could also rely on them to lift me up when I didn't believe in myself.
That's vulnerability, what you just said.
That's something. That's for sure.
And I guarantee you, when someone new who don't know who you are, they connected in and they listen to this live session, I guarantee you when they meet with you, they will feel way more connected with you if compared to if you didn't share that.
Yeah, thank you. And it
Let's
is,
see.
I was going to say that ties to, and somebody's, Barsha said in one of her comments, like Jen Gottlieb in her book says, you like to be vulnerable about things after the fact. I don't remember exactly what it is, but like there are, like what I just did was vulnerability after the fact, where it's like, I haven't overcome it, but I am sharing, I haven't fully overcome it, but I am on the other side of like it being at the point where it's so excruciating. And I don't think where I was a couple months ago, it was so excruciating. Like I wouldn't have even known how to share it. And I think that that's okay too. When we're going through really raw things, sometimes we don't even know how to be vulnerable because it's so raw and so triggering. So yeah,
You have
sorry.
grown so much. Like I've seen you grow in the last few months since I met you. I mean, we know one another. We met first time back in October, right? But I have seen like you're on an exponential growth trajectory, and you work so hard with yourself as well. It's super impressive. But that's back to having that group of people that just keeps lifting you up and keeps giving you feedback, and you dare to be vulnerable, and you just then it becomes accelerated. And I've met people that have 10 years of calendar experience and 1 year real experience. And I've also met people that have 1 year, 1 calendar year, and then 10 year of experience. ICE is a great example. Isa Fidelino, perfect example of someone who is growth hacking her life.
Yes. Yes. She hasn't even been graduated from college for a year and she's like outpacing the average 30-some-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At 22, soon 23,
Yeah.
right?
What did you want to read Drew's comment?
You can wait. Oh, my eyes. Okay. It's powerful to have people in your life who see your potential more than you do and push you out of your comfort zone. I'm looking at you, Avishkar. That's a really great comment. Here, oh, I keep forgetting I can put them up there. The point here is someone actually said this to me recently. They said, Andreas, you're an asshole, but you really care, and you always see the potential in people before they see it themselves. So it's like, but the person also kind of used the asshole word in the sense I'm too direct. But it's a great example, and I love that quote actually. It's surround yourself with people who will see your potential, and that's your Vina story. It's the same. It's this exact same situation.
Yeah, and it is like I remember when I was in therapy at some point. I'm a big believer in therapy, and I remember my therapist talking about how like it's okay. It's like I hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about it with motivation too. It's like your heart doesn't have to be there yet. Like you can just do the action and take the action and let your like other parts of yourself catch up. And so when I say that, I mean like it's okay. It was okay that I didn't believe in myself, but I A was forcing myself to do it anyway, and B was surrounding myself with people that believed in me and saw things in myself I wasn't capable of. And those two things together allowed me to see it in myself and find the truth in myself. So it like started as like not believing in myself, but letting other people nudge me or seeing myself through other people's eyes. But now it's getting at a point, again, still a journey, but where I am learning to see myself through my own eyes. But it wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for putting myself out there and surrounding myself with people that genuinely cared for me.
Yeah. So yours happened by force of, or your journey on your own right now is because of the force of people around you, but you surrounded yourself with those people. So don't give everyone all the credit.
Fair. All right. You're good at that. I love you, Miriam. You're inside my head. Direct is the best way. Yes. Jody, talk about a man that leads with heart. Jody Evans all day long. I'm trying to say.
He's an amazing person.
Yes, he's a special
man. Talk about abundance mindset.
Yeah. Yes. I feel like I learn something every time I talk from him, just from witnessing him he's such like just a person that leads with his heart. And I feel like it's that is very rare to find, especially in any sort of business setting. Oh my goodness, my friend Monica's on here. My friend from high school. Thanks, Monica. I love you. And well, there was somebody else said something. I don't know. Maybe just Donabelle being wonderful. Oh, I just want to say thank you, Donabelle, for the comment about witnessing my growth. Still growing, but grateful to grow alongside others. And it is really, I mean, I'm new to being an entrepreneur, but this is a whole world I never knew existed. And so many people are focused on growth and self-improvement. And I'm like, where have these people been? I went from feeling all alone and like I was the crazy one to being like, wow, like these are my people. So that's been really fun.
I'm impressed that you even keep up with all the comments, because I don't.
Thank you.
And Instagram haven't died yet. I don't know why. I thought it was a limit of an hour.
We're hanging on.
Maybe it just looks like it and we're actually not doing anything. But I want to say the one thing you have and I also have, we have the mindset that limitless leadership or limitless minds, we just got to keep growing, stay curious, and then one day I don't think that they will come. Not for me. Like, I will die curious. That's my life mission. But I think if you stay curious, and also what helped me in the early years was actually just looking up the definition of emotional intelligence and really getting into because I'm a logical person naturally. I'm an engineer, right, originally. But just looking up and reading the emotional intelligence books that are out there is one that's called 2.0 and whatnot. That helped me understand how to categorize the different phases of emotional intelligence and how vulnerability plays into it. But I don't recommend everyone to go out there and stay a learner. I think it's better to be a doer even in this space. So these days, don't go read books, but ChatGPT it can actually help. I know some people that it has helped.
Yeah.
Rosie, we can talk for hours. So Rosie and I, we cheated when we said, let's do this call. What if we have nothing to talk about? So we prepared like a few topics that we could talk about. I think we touched not even half. This could go for another few hours.
Yes, we could. Yeah, and I don't know if it's like because we're going to be doing this on a weekly basis, and obviously we'll have different topics, but even just for people, whether it's in the chat now or to message us or in my Facebook group, if they put it like just things that are relevant or top of mind for people for us to incorporate, because I think it's been really helpful to see people's comments or questions or things that they're thinking about. I feel like it's made it really dynamic, and I would love to do more of that too.
Yeah, I'm going to put up your Facebook group, and I think for everyone listening who don't know about it, it's free Facebook group. You should join it, where Rosie gives out these gems on a weekly basis. So if one of my followers don't know Rosie, and Rosie and I are sort of part of the same community of little bit entrepreneurs, startup people, people who like to invest in real estate. So that's how we sort of found one another. And that's why I've been calling out some of the names we both know. But I strongly recommend, if you don't know Rosie from the past, like, go join this group. And like you said, Rosie, we're going to talk. What did we say? It's the same time every Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific. You and I will jump on and we'll talk about sort of the brain-heart connection, emotional intelligence, leadership. I don't think we have a topic for next week, but I know we have a list of topics we want to talk about. And I agree, like, out with the comments, connect with us on social media, connect with us wherever you'll find us easy. I'll put up the other one, our Instagram handles, and let us know what would help you that we talked about. So it's not only what we have experienced, what will help you. Rosie and I have both the mindset that we want to help as many people as possible. And by help, and we actually debated a lot, how do we help more people, not just one another? And this is the forum. So that's why we're already committed to weekly cadence.
Yes. And the only way we'll know if we're helping people is if they tell us the things that they need help with or want. Like, you and I could talk about this stuff forever. And it's always helpful to hear unique perspectives on things, especially for like our high learners or high input or high intellection, Clifton Strengths people. But like, I loved how much people brought in specific questions and like ask for examples or ask for like, what if this, what if that. I think that going back to vulnerability, A, it's vulnerable to ask the questions, but B, people learn from the questions that people are asking. And it's so much more impactful to know what matters to people.
Yeah, I'm just going to click a few quickly here just so we get them on the recording. Staying curious is really powerful and will surely change your life. Staying curious plants you in the present. Stay curious. Yeah. But what topic? Let us know in the comments afterwards, because I do think we should wrap this up, Rosie. Otherwise, we will empty out, or otherwise, we talk about everything. And like I said, we didn't even get halfway through the list. We can't do that in the first live. We have to
Keep them
make
coming
sure.
back.
Got to keep them coming. The more feedback we get, the better. And if you didn't figure it out, like, we want the feedback. Like, this is no time to sugarcoat things. Like, straight up, what can we help you with?
Yes.
You want to bring guests every now and then?
Wait, do you have a guest you want to bring on right now?
No, I don't. Do we want to make it? Maybe we can bring someone on future calls.
I think that's a great idea. The more, the merrier. Abundance mindset.
Yeah.
Yes.
Always bring on ice. We can always do breaking the ice. That's often a popular topic. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we should wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for all your comments. Amazing interaction, and a lot of people tuned in for quite some time. So for the first one, without almost any promotion. So thank you. Like, PM every Monday Pacific time. And until then, more feedback, the better it is. And go join Rosie's Facebook group. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do these with you. It's been a lot of fun to take our, crazy private conversations public. And it's more fun to do that because then it's basically like our conversations are just involving very large groups of people in it. And so I've learned through our experience today too. So thank you.
Yeah.
And yes,
Likewise.
look forward to many more.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Eddie. Thank you, everyone who said thank you. Have an amazing week, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.